Right.
Falcon punch!
Oh! That hurt.
Yeah, but he'll respond soon.
Yeah.
What's happening, guys? My name is Ren. This is my 4th Epictorial, and for those of you who are new, since I've gotten a lot of new people over the last week or so from my Skyrim video, this video series is where I take you through my own process on some of the effects that I've done on my videos, where I take you through step by step how I did certain effects, certain tips for doing certain things. Also, you guys can help make better videos for the internet. Oh yeah! I'm not going to be covering everything from the video clip I showed at the beginning. I'm just going to mainly show how to make a person fly backwards across a blacktop and hit a wall. If you guys want me to make a part 2 for this tutorial, sound off in the comments and I might be able to do it next week. And the important thing to note here is where the sun is in relation to where you're shooting. So if you're shooting a scene here and the sun's up over here, make sure that when you shoot the green screen, you put up the screen here with the sun in the same orientation. That's really important so you get the shadows right, because those are very subtle things that you might not notice when you're filming, but you're gonna hate yourself later because it's not gonna look good. So if you do it right in the production stage itself, you'll be happy. Oh, I just popped my shoulder. Oh, that hurt. Let's get into it. All right, so as you can see, this is basically just the bare brick bones of this effect. There's nothing flashy here, there's no fire, there's no explosion, there's no blood. This is essentially just taking really bad green screen footage and keying it out, adding back in parts that are necessary, just a few tips and tricks on how to deal with bad green screen footage essentially, and then animating it in 3D space so that you get a realistic blowback effect here. So if we go ahead and get into it, let's go ahead and drop our punch footage to a new comp. This is essentially our clean plate. It's just, I had my buddy Matt here just kind of stand there because in the shot previous to this was all the stuff going on, so I didn't really need him to actually perform the punch at all here. It's just, I'll start off right here at the beginning and go flying backwards. Okay, let's go ahead and take our green screen footage, which I shot. It's like 2.5 minutes in length, and as you can see here, I essentially just set up a giant green screen. It's a 10-foot by 20-foot screen. I had my girlfriend and my friend Spencer, who's obviously in the video, just kind of hold it down from the wind blowing around, and we set up one of my mattresses underneath it so that I could jump backwards onto it without worry of getting hurt. So I just kind of did that a couple times. As you can see, basically just reset the screen every time. And then the second one that I did, I just kind of laid backwards and flipped backwards from it. Just kind of rolled backwards. And what I'm going to do here is essentially just combine these two clips together so it combines me jumping backwards right here and then rolling back. So let's go ahead and find the starting one from that. I'll start like right there. Let's go ahead and duplicate this because we're gonna have 2 layers. Alt left bracket, and it's Control D to duplicate. Go back until I hit page down, about right here, I think. Alt right bracket. Let's go to our, where do I roll backwards? About right here, so page up. We want to try to match it, and I think a good matching point would be pretty much about right here. So let's select our bottom layer, Alt left bracket, and then just kind of go, I roll backwards a bit, and then I'll stop it about right there, Alt right bracket. And let's drag these 2 clips together and go ahead and zoom in. So I fly backwards, hit the ground, and it cuts over to me rolling backwards. Now this part right here is going to be way too long. I need this to be about 1/4 of the length. So if I right click, go to time, and then time stretch, if I type in 25%, it'll be 25% of its original length. So, and I also want to line these up a little bit better, referring to where I'm sitting at specifically. So if we just drag this over 1 frame, select this, make the opacity down to say something like 50, we could line it up, take our bottom layer, just kind of line it up, get my buttocks together, and then voila. So even though all the scenery kind of changes, I essentially stay in place. So if we go to the beginning of that shot, say right here, and hit B, it'll put our working composition to there, go to our last frame, hit N, and then right click on it and trim comp to work area. So now this is essentially our working composition of this. So what we want to do is make this into one layer, and by doing that we'll select both of these, go up to layer, and then pre-compose. And it beeps at you, you know, gotta name it. And let's label this our source green screen footage. And now we have our one layer. We can go ahead and apply a mask to a garbage mask, really, to just kind of outline the green screen. So if we start there, go around, where the screen ends. Oh, it's going to be an issue up here. If we go back into our footage here, we can select both of these and actually drag them down, because we're going to be needing this top bit of information up here. Go back here. Let's go ahead and select our entire mat. Just kind of reposition it. No big deal. Alrighty. So now we have our garbage mat, and we're going to want to remove that too. That's unfortunate. Select both of these, drag that down to there, select all of those, drag these over. And obviously you can get as detailed as you want with these. It doesn't have to be super specific. And then as you can see, my arms clearly go out of the frame, but we'll deal with that in a little bit. Okay, that seems all right. And there's several plugins you can use to key out your footage, but I'm going to specifically use Primatte. I think it's really great. After Effects comes with, I forgot the Keylight, I believe, from the Foundry. Yeah, Keylight. But I'm going to be using Primatte, which I believe is, to a certain extent, a lot more powerful because you have more control to a certain extent. At least I feel like it anyway. So if we go ahead and just select our background here with our plugin selected, it'll automatically say that's what we want. And then we click our clean background button. And I'm going to go up here to sampling style and select rectangle, because this is pretty much the worst type of green screen footage you could possibly work with all the shadows and wrinkles. This is a nightmare, but we'll make it do. So this will be a good learning experience, because this is about as difficult as they come. So with clean background, just kind of select a big area and just kind of continue to select areas that need to be keyed out. And then once you got most of them kind of gone, select your foreground footage and just kind of bring that back. And if you think you have it, we can go ahead and select matte under the view. And actually, yeah, that doesn't look too bad. Our goal is to make our person, our actor here, as white as possible and our background as black as possible. That's not racist, that's fact. Okay. Sweet, we can go back to our comp view, and it looks pretty solid so far. We're getting some holes, as you can see, especially here. And that's because the color, if we go ahead and try to select this back, it brings in these background. It's like, well, okay, you don't want that, so you go back and select clean background again, select all that, but then it's just this ever-ending cycle of, but I want this, but I want that. Oh, and the reason being is because the values of the pixel of the spill on my jeans here and the color of the screen itself are identical. So there isn't really particularly a way to differentiate. So what you can do is go ahead and leave these holes, and then you can go to matte sponge and just kind of bring it back a little. And go back to, nope, not that one. Clean background. What we're going to do is we're going to essentially leave these holes in and just kind of worry about getting all the edges of everything else. So for the most part, it looks decent. other than the fact it looks terrible, but I'll get to that. Okay, so that looks all right. What we'll do is we're gonna duplicate this footage again, Control D, and on this bottom layer here, if we go ahead and hit our mask, let's go ahead and disable our top footage real quick. Let's delete this mask. So now we're gonna get everything else back into it. And what we're gonna do here is we're gonna fill in the holes. So as you can see right here is a good shot where there's lots of holes on my jeans from the spill. We just try to specifically bring this all back in. Well, that was probably a little bit too much, but no big deal. Let's go back to our point selector. Yada yada. And you can get as detailed as you want with this. I'm probably going a little bit too in detail for this tutorial. And we can go to our defocus here. Let's go ahead and not make it inward, just kind of blur it out to say 10. Something along the lines of that. Just kind of scrub through, see if it's generically kind of good. And because this is on the bottom, we're going to basically just fill in the holes. So we'll select a mask and we'll just kind of outline the area kind of roughly, and we can go ahead and actually keyframe this a little bit if we want, depending on how much we want it to be. By doing this, we could actually disable our bottom layer and just look at our top layer, because this is actually what we want to fill in. We want to make sure that all the holes are being filled in. Move our mask down a little. And this is a good way so you don't have to work with the settings specifically. A good solution is to work with multiple layers and masks. All right, so if we turn on both of these now, deselect the mask. Oops, that last one there is probably a little bit too much. Probably don't need anything more than that, so off left bracket. All right, so now the next thing we need to do is return my arm as it disappears from the mask. So let's duplicate our top layer again. We'll delete the mask here and also turn off, delete our key. So we have a just plain vanilla slate here. And what we're going to do is we're going to select the roto brush and literally just roto brush back in my arms. And this is going to be a little bit of a long process simply by the nature of roto brushing. But as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. I've gone over this in previous tutorials as well, so you can go back and look at those for specifics. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward through this and kind of return to this when I get to the end. Okay, so I've finished roto brushing, basically my hands that go outside of the screen here. And you'll notice that like the very first shot here, I have my head out of the screen, but I'm just going to go ahead and, here's the effect preview, not use that shot right here. So if we go from this point forward until the hand is no longer in the thing, think about, yeah, right here. We'll go ahead and clip that off. There we go, and trim that to there. So now that we have our very rough edit of flying backwards, very rough, let's render it. I'm going to basically just turn this into a file that I can use, so every time I animate it or whatever, it doesn't have to re-render all of those settings, all of those effects to make it what I had every single frame. So I'll just go to QuickTime, make the format a PNG file off of QuickTime, and make sure you select RGB plus alpha for the channel. That way it preserves the transparency you get. And I'll hit render. Okay, so as you can see, it didn't take very long to render at all. It only took 20 seconds, which is not too bad. I'll bring that footage into our project panel, And we don't want to bring it into our footage just yet. Like, we don't want to just have it here. We still have to clean it up a little bit, like all the spill, all the edges. Yeah, so let's go ahead and delete that and drop it into a new composition. And if you have Primatte, I would suggest just using this again and go down to the bottom here for the spill killer, select green, and then hit enable. And if we put our range, say down to like 40%, and then just increase this, it'll probably be better when you see the extreme spill right here. We zoom in. If we increase this, spill goes away. You don't want to maximize it. You kind of just want to finesse it a little bit till about probably something like that. If we go ahead and minimize that, that's the only thing out of that entire tool. You could use other spill killers if you want to, but I like this one because it's easy. If I go to refine matte, drop that out, and right away it kind of destroys it. We don't really want any of this. That's because it's using all these other things that we don't want. Get rid of that. Reduce chatter down to like 0. And feather perhaps up to like say 50. And our choke up to say 25%. Smooth this down to 1. Maybe choke a little bit more. Yeah, just leave it at 50. Maybe turn the decontaminate edge colors back on and just increase this a little. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to stabilize it. As you can see, when I jump backwards, I am actually going a little bit back, so by the nature of going backwards, I get smaller. And what we want to do is, oh, I've got this little thing here. That's not a big deal. We can get rid of that in a moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to select our footage and duplicate it and just kind of go to the middle. Take our top layer, just kind of go to the, shift it over to the end, and take our bottom layer and shift it that way. So now you can really see the size difference between these two. So if we select both of them, hit scale, S on the keyboard to select your scale, and set your top one down to, I don't know, something about like 80%. And then your bottom one up to, say, 120%. That looks pretty good. I kind of already knew these figures already, but the point of this is to try to measure it out. And then on your top layer, actually set a keyframe, shift this back to where it originally was, and go to your very last frame, and then set it to the value you figured down below, which is 120%. And you can go ahead and delete that bottom layer. So now, as I'm jumping backwards, I'm also increasing the scale a little bit. All right, and now if we select P on the keyboard, bring up our position, we're just going to try to, I'm just going to stabilize my mid-drift area. So it's pretty stable so far. Kind of slide it over. And now I'm falling down, hit the ground, drag that back up. Shift over like that. And then eventually get up like that. Something simple like that, you know. But what we've created is essentially just a stabilized shot, almost as if I'm on an actual wire rig flying backwards. But this was literally just, you know, run-of-the-mill, put it together from green screen footage. That was pretty much the worst green screen footage you could possibly imagine. And it also, ooh, we don't want to cut off our hand here, so if we select our footage and select position, you select all your keyframes and then you can drag it down. And just make sure none of your footage actually gets cut off, which mine doesn't. And to get rid of this, I'm just going to draw a mask around it, and then bring up my mask properties and subtract it. That's all. Just so I don't have it popping up on me. All right, now what we can do is bring this into our comp. So if we go back to our footage, go to our project, and drop this out here. As you can see, I'll go ahead and set my resolution down to half. Kind of flow backwards. It's not the best of keying. And like I said, this is important because I filmed it in the same sun orientation, so all the shadows kind of match up with everyone else. There's shadows going over here, shadows on the other side of my leg here. That's exactly what we want. It helps. I haven't even done any color correction. It already kind of looks like it belongs, right? And let's see. Now, what we need to do is scale it up a bit, get it to the right size. When you're scaling like this, hold down Shift and it'll scale it properly without distorting it to scale. Maybe a little bit larger. But this is the general area. We can go ahead and duplicate our bottom layer here, put it above. Make it one frame, Alt right bracket, select the rotor brush, double click on the footage. Just kind of do our thing here. That looks pretty good. Maybe get rid of some of that. All right. That was pretty quick and dirty. Set the feather of this really high. Cool. So the next thing we need to do is create a new camera. And this is where it's important to know the settings, or rather know the lens data that you used. For this shot, I think I shot at about 17 millimeters on my Canon T2i. This was last August. And this camera menu here goes by the full frame approximation. So because I shot on a cropped sensor, which most of the Canon camera lineups, including Nikon's as well, unless you're using a 5D Mark II from Canon, are going to be a cropped sensor by 1.6. So 17 or 16, if you multiply that by 1.6, you get about 24 or 28. I'm going with the 28 millimeter version because I think it looks a little bit smoother than 24. So once we have that, we don't really touch that at all. We'll never again touch the camera, but it's important for when we make our punch footage here 3D. So let's go ahead and select our 3D object here and bring up our position and hit a keyframe for this first one here. Oh, not that one. We don't want to touch this one at all. It's our alpha actor. Let's get rid of that. Set a keyframe for this. Get rid of that. Okay. As you can see, now we have this. Let's go forward until I hit the ground at about right here. And now I'm just going to push this way back in Z space. Way back. So far I'm at 2,700 or so. I'm going to put this at 15,000. And that'll get the kind of scale I'm looking for. And if you try to drag it, it'll take a while. So if you hold down Shift, it'll go much quicker. I think 10 times the speed or something like that. So somewhere in the area of about right there is where I want him to bounce. I'm talking to myself as a him. It's strange. But anyway, with that kind of thing, you get a realistic fallback. Because as you go backwards, the amount you get smaller. It's a weird mathematical thing, but basically the speed at which you shrink as you go away decreases. So at first you get smaller really quickly, but then the speed at which you get smaller slows down the further away you get. But okay, now that I have my first little animation here, we'll go ahead and go to the last frame about right here or so, and then set this back up to full. I'll put this, say, to 22,000 in the distance. Make sure you're on the Z coordinate here. And it goes way off whack. That's normal. Just put it into place up on the wall. Something like that. Before we go in and specifically try to get the look of our animation here, let's go ahead and bring out our wall hit, because that's also quite important. Let's go ahead and drop that into a new composition so we can specifically get where I run over. And this is also good for like getting a reference for how large you are in the distance. So this is what I use to essentially kind of figure out the scale of how big I want to be in the distance, which is why I figured out the 15,000 and 22,000. So I think this is the clip I used right here. I just kind of go up against the wall and I jump up. So I'll clip it about right here. Alt left bracket. Go a few seconds forward. Alt right bracket. N, go to the beginning. B, trim comp to work area. All right, now we've established our working right here. So if we go back to our punch footage and drop our wall hit out, we want to line it up. So here's where we make contact. Slide this to just the moment. About right there. I'll trim it up. So the next thing we need to do is we need to actually cut this down. If we turn off our mask, you can see big color difference between the two, but that's okay. Let's just add a curves to our footage and adjust this, and it's quite a bit brighter. So if we just kind of bring down the brightness until it matches our footage, it'll actually match up really nicely. About right there, so yeah, all right, perfect. And to round it off, let's hit F on our keyboard and give it a feather of about 15. Can't see the edges at all now, perfect. So now that just kind of allows us to hit the wall, and yeah. If we extend this out, we could actually line this up specifically. Alpha actor, move it over, move it up. All right. So now we can get the arcs and whatnot on our animation here set up. And to do that, you'll notice if you select this first keyframe here, this little tiny little dot pops up. It's kind of hard to see, and a lot of the times it's really hard to find, but this is essentially a handle. And you can literally change the speed of the animation key points that are interpolated between keyframes with this little handle right here. So if I undo that, you don't really want to change the length of it, just kind of change the direction. So kind of move it like you're moving the hand of a clock, kind of upwards, but over to the left a little to keep the same length. Something along the lines of that. So then I fly backwards and then fall down on the ground and then roll over. And the second keyframe here also has a little handle. Oops. Try not to change the length of it too much. And if you hold down Alt and hit the other one, you can move it independently. So if I hold down Alt and just kind of aim this in the general direction of this last one here, and then this one, I could point downwards. So that's the magic trick. That's the secret weapon right there, is being able to use those handles on an animation and make something look like you're flying way backwards in space. So let's go ahead and smooth and polish this last little effect out. We'll add a shadow here in a moment. And for the most part, that bounce actually looks pretty good. Let's set our RAM preview here. It could use a lot of improvement, but for the most part, I'd say it looks pretty decent. It doesn't have any motion blur yet. We can go ahead and add that real quick. Just turn it on literally for the layer. Okay, say it looks decent. And if you don't like the speed at which you hit the ground and then continue moving, you could always change the length of these a little bit. So you kind of want these in and out points here to be kind of the same length, for instance. Yeah. All right. Okay, so now let's go ahead and add a shadow real quick. And by doing that, we'll just basically take our footage here and we'll duplicate it and take our, if we take our bottom one and label it shadow, Shift A to bring up the anchor point and just kind of draw. That looks funny. But then if we select our position of all of them and then bring them down, so now we kind of want to lay this down on the ground as a shadow. So if we hit R, we can bring up our rotation, and let's just kind of flip our X rotation the other way, down onto the ground, something like that, and then kind of flip it, not that one, Z, just kind of in the direction of shadows. Let's turn off our motion blur for the comp real quick. Don't want to be a super render hog. And we'll bring out our tent. We're going to set up a tent, you know, cook some marshmallows, build a fire, good times. No, T-I-N-T. Let's bring that out. We're going to map our whites to black. So basically, you're just turning the entire layer black. And then we can bring out a little fast blur. And for this, what we're going to do is we're essentially just going to soften the edge. We don't want to blur it. There's a big difference between blurring and softening. And here we're softening. So I'm going to give it a blur of like, say, 10. Just to kind of make that edge a little fine, not super hard. And we want to match it to this shadow here, for instance. So I'm going to go ahead and hit F4, change the transfer mode to overlay, and then hit T to, say, drop the opacity down to like 50%. And I'm going to actually add one more tint to this because you can see this is a little bit of a warmer color than this right here. This is kind of like a cooler shadow. So if we tint our black to, say, this little aqua tealish color, hit OK, and then set our amount to 0 and slowly build it up. Something about there. Super subtle, but it helps make it look a little bit more realistic. And then if we bring back our position keyframes and click on our first keyframe right here, we take our handle and literally just rotate it, kind of stretch it in the other direction, kind of cheat it a little to make it look like it's actually going out with the shadow. And make sure you do it with the other handle as well so it doesn't do this little weird curvy thing down at the end. So then your shadow meets up there once you land. Although here it kind of doesn't do that. So you have to go to your position and then move it accordingly, like a lot. Go to our last frame here. And then we could change our little handles here to match up the shadow. Cool, so it looks like our shadows for the most part pretty lined up once we're basically sliding along the ground and then impact with the wall here. So you get this crazy weird S-curve. But you also get this really cool shadow effect, which is made of nothing but our footage here. And obviously, this isn't how a shadow would be literally translated to the ground, but it goes so fast and you're not really looking at it. What you're really noticing is the fact that there is a shadow-looking blur on the ground, which is your main goal here. Sweet, so if we set both of these to motion blur and turn the back on for the comp, let's give this a quick preview. All right, so this actually looks fairly decent. I would do probably a few more things to touch up a little bit, but for the most part, the touch-ups I would make would be super subtle. I just wanted to basically demonstrate how I literally took the worst possible green screen footage I could possibly make and take all the green screen away, take two separate shots, combine them together to make it look like one seamless shot. Like right here, when I hit the ground, that's a different clip from a different point in time, but it looks like it's the same flowing motion, and I'm flying backwards. Yeah, I think this is a really cool effect, and I've never really seen any effects out there that really take advantage of this. It's the same exact principle as the bullet casings, where you just move it in Z space to change the size of it, rather than altering the scale and position values on their own, because it's not linear. Linear being like a straight line between 2 points. It just doesn't work that way. You have to do it this way. So all right, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Obviously, I haven't done any of the flashy things. If you guys really need them, I can do those next week. So sound off in the comments if that's something you would really like to see. Would be like to say how I did the Falcon thing. I literally just overlaid a picture and added some explosions from the Action Essentials pack to be where the picture was of the Falcon, and just that's all it is. I really just added some fire and a little shockwave, which was literally just a bulge that I animated outwards. It's really simple, but if you want, I could polish out this tutorial. This is what I consider to be the biggest part of this effect, so I hope you learned something from this. All right. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up on Facebook or Twitter. I tend to respond to almost everything that people send me because I don't really have too much traffic to what I do. So I have time to go through everything. So pretty good chance that anything you type, I'll read. All right. I will see you next week. Toodles.